Madison Square Garden, New York City. November 18th, 1993, 8:47 p.m. Whitney Houston was in the middle of performing I Will Always Love You when something in the audience caught her eye. In section 104, row 8, seat 12, a young man was sobbing uncontrollably, not the usual tears of joy that Whitney was accustomed to seeing at her concerts, but deep, heart-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from a place of profound pain. What Whitney did next had never been done before by any major recording artist in the history of Madison Square Garden. She stopped singing mid-song, walked to the edge of the stage, and asked a question that would change two lives forever. "Sir, are you okay?" Those four words would lead to one of the most emotional moments in concert history and a friendship that would span decades. Before I share this incredible story with you, if you want to discover more untold moments from music's greatest legends and the lives they touched, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about a concert moment. It's about the healing power of music, the strength found in shared grief, and how sometimes the most broken hearts can become the strongest healers. David Miller was 22 years old when he walked into Madison Square Garden that November evening, carrying more pain than any young man should have to bear. 6 months earlier, he had lost the most important person in his world, his mother, Sarah Miller. Sarah had been David's everything. After his father died in a car accident when David was just 8 years old, it had been just the two of them against the world. Sarah worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, cleaning offices in the morning and waiting tables at night, but she never once complained. Instead, she filled their small Brooklyn apartment with music, love, and hope. Growing up, David had watched his mother struggle with exhaustion and worry, but every evening when she came home, she would put on one of Whitney's albums and transform. Her shoulders would straighten, her smile would return, and for those precious moments, their tiny apartment felt like a palace. "Music is medicine, baby," Sarah would tell David as she danced around their kitchen. "When life gets hard, you put on Whitney, and you remember that somebody out there understands exactly how you feel." Those kitchen dance sessions became David's most treasured memories. His mother spinning him around to "I Want to Dance with Somebody," both of them laughing until their sides hurt. Whitney Houston had been the soundtrack to David and Sarah's life together. Every Sunday morning, while Sarah cooked breakfast, Whitney's voice would fill their kitchen. "Greatest Love of All" was their song. Sarah would sing along, often with tears in her eyes, and when David asked her why she was crying, she would say, "Because baby, this song reminds me that no matter what happens, you are my greatest love of all." Sarah had discovered she was pregnant with David when she was just 19, unmarried and scared. Her family had turned their backs on her, but Whitney's music gave her strength. "I believe the children are our future," Sarah would say, quoting the lyrics, "and you, David, you are my future." In March 1993, Sarah began feeling tired, more often than usual. She attributed it to working double shifts, but when the exhaustion was accompanied by a persistent cough and unexplained weight loss, David convinced her to see a doctor. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt: stage 3 breast cancer. The doctor's words seemed to echo in slow motion. "We need to start treatment immediately, but I have to be honest with you. This is aggressive, and it has already spread to the lymph nodes." The next 6 months were a blur of chemotherapy sessions, hospital visits, and sleepless nights. Sarah fought with everything she had, and David never left her side. He took a leave of absence from his job at a local auto repair shop to care for her full-time. During her weakest moments, when the chemo made her so sick she couldn't keep food down, David would play Whitney's albums softly in the background. "Play Greatest Love of All again," Sarah would whisper, her voice barely audible. "It makes me feel like I'm giving you strength, even when I feel so weak." As Sarah's condition worsened, she made David promise her something that seemed impossible at the time. "When Whitney comes to New York for her tour," Sarah said, gripping his hand with what little strength she had left, "I want you to go. I want you to go to that concert and sing our song for both of us," David protested. How could he enjoy a concert when his mother was dying? How could he celebrate music when his world was falling apart? But Sarah was insistent. "Music saved me when I was alone and scared with you. It gave me hope when I had none. Promise me you'll go. Promise me you'll let Whitney's voice remind you that love never really dies. Sarah Miller passed away on September 15th, 1993, with David holding her hand and Whitney's I Will Always Love You playing softly on the radio. Her last words to him were, "Remember our song, baby. Remember that you are still my greatest love of all." David felt like his heart had been ripped from his chest. At 22, he was completely alone in the world, with no siblings, no father, and now no mother. The grief was suffocating. When Whitney's Bodyguard World Tour was announced and Madison Square Garden was added to the schedule, David remembered his mother's words. He used almost every penny he had saved to buy a single ticket, Section 104, Row 8, Seat 12. He couldn't afford anything closer, but Sarah had always said, "Whitney's voice can reach you anywhere. It doesn't matter where you're sitting. If you're listening with your heart, you'll feel every note." The night of the concert, David almost didn't go. He sat in his empty apartment, holding the ticket and a framed photo of his mother, wondering how he could possibly sit through Whitney singing the songs that reminded him so much of her. But he had made a promise, and Sarah Miller's son always kept his promises. He tucked his mother's photo into his jacket pocket and made the subway journey into Manhattan. Madison Square Garden was electric that night. Whitney was at the absolute peak of her powers, riding high on the massive success of the Bodyguard soundtrack. From the moment she walked on stage, the audience was captivated. She opened with "I Want to Dance with Somebody," and the arena erupted. David found himself smiling for the first time in months. There was something magical about being surrounded by 20,000 people who all loved the same music that had defined his life with his mother. But when Whitney began the opening notes of Greatest Love of All, David's composure completely crumbled. This was their song. This was the song his mother had sung to him as a child. The song she'd hummed during his high school graduation. The song she'd requested on her deathbed. As Whitney sang, "I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way." David could hear his mother's voice harmonizing in his memory. The tears came in waves and he couldn't stop them. Whitney, even while performing for thousands, had an uncanny ability to connect with individual audience members. She had always possessed this gift, an almost supernatural awareness of the emotional energy in a room. As she reached the second verse of the song, she noticed a young man in section 104 who wasn't just crying. He was sobbing with the kind of grief that comes from loss so profound, it changes everything. Without thinking, Whitney did something unprecedented. She stopped singing. The music continued for a few beats as her band tried to figure out what was happening, but then they too stopped playing. 20,000 people fell silent, all eyes turning to see what had captured Whitney's attention. Walking to the very edge of the stage, Whitney looked directly at David and asked, "Sir, are you okay? What's wrong?" David looked up through his tears, hardly believing that Whitney Houston was speaking directly to him. "My mother," he called out, his voice breaking. "She passed away 2 months ago. This was our song. She made me promise to come tonight, to sing it for both of us. But I can't. I miss her too much." The arena was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Whitney felt her own eyes filling with tears. In that moment, she wasn't a global superstar performing for thousands. She was a daughter who understood the profound love between a mother and child. "What was your mother's name?" Whitney asked softly. "Sarah," David replied. "Sarah Miller. She loved you so much. Your music got us through everything." Without hesitation, Whitney made a decision that would become legendary in concert history. "David, would you come up here with me? I think your mother would want to hear us sing her song together." The audience erupted in supportive applause as security helped David make his way to the stage. When he climbed the steps and walked toward Whitney, his legs were shaking, and he could barely believe this was really happening. When David reached Whitney, she embraced him in a hug that lasted nearly a minute. As she held him, she whispered in his ear, "Tell me about Sarah. Tell me what she meant to you." David, still in shock, began to share fragments of his story. How his mother had raised him alone, how she'd worked 2 jobs, how Whitney's music had been the soundtrack to their life together. Whitney listened to every word, occasionally nodding and squeezing his hand. Then, turning to face the audience with David beside her, Whitney spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet my friend David." David lost his mother Sarah just 2 months ago, and she made him promise to come here tonight. Sarah loved greatest love of all because it reminded her that her son was her greatest love of all. Tonight, we're going to sing this song for Sarah and for every mother who loves their children with all their heart. What happened next was pure magic. Whitney began singing again, but this time she sang directly to David, and by extension, to the memory of his mother. When she reached the chorus, she encouraged David to sing along. His voice was shaky and filled with emotion, but he sang every word. 20,000 people joined in, creating a chorus of voices that seemed to lift Sarah's memory right up to the heavens. As the song reached its climax, Whitney put her arm around David's shoulders and said, "Sarah's love for you isn't gone, David. It's right here." She touched his chest. "And it always will be. Love doesn't die. It just changes form. Your mother's love is now part of who you are, and it will guide you for the rest of your life." The audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. David was crying again, but these were different tears. Tears of healing, of connection, of feeling less alone in his grief. When the applause finally died down, Whitney whispered to him, "Stay right here with me for the rest of the show. Your mother would have wanted to see the whole concert." David remained on stage for Whitney's entire remaining set, sometimes sitting on the edge of the platform, sometimes standing beside her during certain songs. For those 2 hours, he felt like he was exactly where his mother would have wanted him to be. When Whitney sang "I Will Always Love You" as her closing number, she dedicated it to Sarah Miller and to all the mothers whose love transcends even death. After the show, Whitney invited David backstage. They talked for over 2 hours about loss, about music, about the power of keeping promises to the people we love. Whitney shared that she too had experienced profound loss, and that music had been her way of staying connected to those who were gone. "When I lost my cousin Diane's guidance early in my career, I thought I'd lost my musical compass," Whitney confided. "But I learned that the people we love don't really leave us. They become part of our voice, part of our strength." She told David about her own relationship with her mother, Whitney Houston, and how terrifying the thought of losing her was. "Your mother knew what she was doing when she made you promise to come tonight," Whitney continued, her voice gentle but firm. "She knew you needed to remember that you're not alone in this world. There are people who will love you and support you, even strangers who understand your pain. That's what music does. It connects hearts across impossible distances." Whitney's words wrapped around David's grief like a warm blanket, not erasing the pain but making it bearable. Before David left that night, Whitney did something extraordinary. She gave him her personal phone number and told him, "When the grief gets too heavy, and it will, you call me. Day or night, I don't care. You call me, and we'll talk about Sarah or music or whatever you need to talk about. Your mother's story touched my heart tonight, and now you're part of my family." Over the following months, Whitney kept her promise. She would call David regularly, especially on difficult days like holidays or his mother's birthday. When David mentioned that he was struggling financially and considering dropping out of the community college where he'd been studying automotive technology, Whitney quietly arranged for his tuition to be paid. When David discovered this act of generosity, Whitney told him, "Your mother worked 2 jobs to give you opportunities. I'm just making sure her sacrifices weren't in vain." Whitney's support went beyond financial assistance. She encouraged David to pursue grief counseling and connected him with other young people who had lost parents. Through these connections and conversations, David discovered that helping others navigate loss gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his mother's death. He changed his major to social work with a focus on bereavement counseling. During his final semester of college, David wrote Whitney a letter explaining how her kindness had not only saved his life, but had inspired him to dedicate his career to helping others heal from loss. Whitney responded with a handwritten note that read, "David, your mother would be so proud of the man you've become. You've taken her love and multiplied it, sharing it with people who need it most. That's what love is supposed to do. It's supposed to grow and heal and help others. Sarah's legacy lives on through every person you help." In 2001, David established the Sarah Miller Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing support services for young adults who have lost parents. The foundation offers grief counseling, financial assistance for education, and peer support groups. Whitney served on the board of directors until her death in 2012, often appearing at fundraising events and personally mentoring some of the young people the foundation served. She would say, "Every time we help someone heal from loss, we're honoring not just Sarah's memory, but every parent who ever loved a child unconditionally." The foundation's signature program, called Kitchen Dance Sessions, was inspired by David's memories of dancing with his mother. Trained counselors work with grieving young adults to rediscover joy through music and movement, helping them reconnect with positive memories of their lost parents. The program has become so successful that it's now been replicated in over 50 cities across the United States. The foundation has since helped over 3,000 young people navigate the journey of loss and healing, with many graduates going on to work in counseling, social work, and nonprofit management themselves. When Whitney passed away, David was devastated by the loss of his mentor and friend. But at her memorial service, he stood before the congregation and shared the story of that November night in 1993. "Whitney gave me many gifts," he said, "but the greatest gift was teaching me that love is eternal. She showed me that my mother's love didn't end when she died. It just found a new way to work in the world, through Whitney's kindness, through the foundation we built, and through every life we've been able to touch." Today, David Miller is 53 years old and continues to run the Sarah Miller Foundation from his office in Brooklyn, not far from the apartment where he grew up with his mother. On his desk sits a framed photo of him and Whitney from that magical night at Madison Square Garden, alongside a picture of his mother. Above his desk hangs a plaque with Whitney's words, "Love doesn't die, it just changes form." Every year on November 18th, the anniversary of that life-changing concert, David visits his mother's grave and plays Greatest Love of All. He tells her about the lives the foundation has touched, the young people who have found hope in their darkest moments, and how Whitney's simple act of compassion created ripples that continue to spread decades later. "You were right, Mom," he always says at the end of these visits. Whitney's voice really could reach anyone, anywhere, as long as they were listening with their heart. The power of that November night in 1993 extends far beyond David's personal healing. Every person helped by the Sarah Miller Foundation carries forward the love that began with a young single mother in Brooklyn who found strength in Whitney's music, was multiplied by Whitney's compassion toward a grieving son, and continues to grow with each life touched by David's work. 20,000 people witnessed something extraordinary that night. The moment when music transcended entertainment and became healing. When a superstar remembered that fame's greatest purpose is to lift others up. And when a promise made by a dying mother became a legacy of hope for thousands of people she would never meet. That's the true power of love. It never really dies. It just finds new voices to sing through, new hands to work through, and new hearts to heal through. Whitney Houston knew this truth, and on a November night in 1993, she taught it to a broken young man who would spend the rest of his life proving it to others. Some moments change everything. Some promises echo through generations. And sometimes the greatest love of all is the love that refuses to let us grieve alone.